This is Cali Cat Tab Talks, and I have Laurie Kaye here, and she's going to be talking about her book. She is the author of Confessions of a Rock and Roll Name Dropper. So the question would be for me to her is, when someone asks, who is Laurie Kaye, the woman behind the memoir, the journalist, the survivor, how do you introduce yourself?
Well, I'm happy to let you know also that my book title is actually Confessions of a Rock and Roll Name Dropper, My Life Leading Up to John Lennon's Last Interview. And it's the story of my rock radio related life and career wrapped around December 8th, 1980, John Lennon's last day on the planet, and the day I co-conducted what tragically turned out to be his final interview. And I let everyone know I've gone all the way from being an on-air radio newscaster and rock radio special writer and producer to a video and TV production worker to my current title, a memoir author and promoter. And it's all extremely exciting.
Wow. So, what finally made you say, it's time? I'm ready to tell the story in a book.
Well, I'd wanted to write the rock radio related story of my life for over 40 years, especially with John originally encouraging me during our interview. But I've been so busy working and feeling guilty all these years, I had to wait until COVID came on in 2020 and basically caused TV production to shut down for a while. So I finally had the time and gave myself the opportunity to tell the incredible rock related stories of my entire life.
Yeah, yeah, I read that in your book. Wow. You went from a teen runaway to studying Balinese, I believe that's how you say that, dance in Indonesia, and landed in the heart of rock and roll. What was the thread that pulled you through all these chapters?
Well, everything from being raised by a dysfunctional family that encouraged me to get extra educated and travel and start my radio career super early to having plenty of experts encourage me. So it all worked out really well.
What did music mean to you before you ever held a microphone or sat in a studio?
Well, I was plugging a transistor radio in my ears day and night, starting as a toddler to listen to music and keep away from my discouraging mother and dysfunctional family. And it worked really well to help me fall in love incredibly early in my life with so many amazing musicians and bands, everyone from little Richard Penniman to Elvis Presley to the Beach Boys and then the Beatles. And as I got older and went to school, I still loved them all and enjoyed so many more as well, especially starting with the Monkees.
Befor we get to that day, what was your relationship with John Lennon's music and message growing up?
Well, I'd been listening to him. I'd been a Beatles fan since the minute I first heard them on the radio in LA. As a kid, they were singing Please Please Me and From Me to You and I Want to Hold Your Hand, which are songs I still love hearing. And then seeing them on TV on the Ed Sullivan Show was amazing. And going to the theater to see their very first movie, A Hard Day's Night, was totally terrific. And I got to see it again recently in a theater. It was like living it all over
Hmm.
again. And then I unexpectedly got to catch the Beatles live in concert at Dodger Stadium in August 1966. And I was a kid. Yay, it was great.
So you interviewed giants like David Bowie, Jagger, McCartney, Grace Slick, Talking Heads. What did those experiences teach you about artist fame and humanity?
Well, I learned how to research and come up with important and appropriate questions to ask them all and let them know things about me that I figured would turn them on and encourage exciting answers, which it did.
But what was the energy like walking into Dakota that morning? Did anything feel different?
Well, I was so excited to get to the Dakota on December 8th, 1980, after arriving with my RKO radio team in New York the day before and spending the night at the Plaza Hotel. And that's where the Beatles stayed when they first came to New York years before in 1964 for the Ed Sullivan Show. and I knew our interview with John and Yoko was going to be absolutely great. And I'd already solo interviewed former Fab Four member George Harrison in December '78, Beatles producer George Martin in January 1980, and I'd been sent to London with my team in June 1979 by RKO to meet up with Paul and Linda McCartney and their latest lineup of Wings. It was all super cool. So I was thrilled for the chance to finally get together with John, whose music and intellect I'd admired so much over the years. And I knew we had a number of things in common, too. Everything from bizarre family upbringing to our time both spent in Indonesia on Bali, and we both totally enjoyed it.
So you described sharing a love seat with John Lennon, watching him push his glasses down his nose and smile at you. What do you remember vividly about that moment?
It was so incredible to have John compliment all my comments and questions, saying things as he sat right next to me like, "Exactly, Laurie. And yes, love, you're right. That's it." It just made me feel so talented, intelligent, and verified.
You about John and Yoko that day, something the world wouldn't know from the headlines or history books.
Well, it was, of course, great to hear and see how much they cared for each other and how happy they were to be together again and create and record music. Plus, hearing them deeply describe their original meetup years before and their very first date and the first time they made love was exciting. And having John tell us that he wouldn't want to have a concert tour for Double Fantasy without Yoko was inspiring too.
When you listen back to the interview now, what stands out that you didn't fully gasp at 20 something?
Well, it actually makes me somewhat sad to listen to the entire interview now, because of course, now I know that John was shot and killed mere hours after our time sitting and talking together ended. Plus, it's super tragic to hear him say that he hoped Yoko would be the one who died before he did. That he hoped Yoko wouldn't be the one who died before he did, even though she was over 7 years older than he was, because he'd miss her way too much, which of course isn't what ended up happening. It turned out completely the opposite.
Yeah, but you encountered the man who killed John later. You've spoken about the guilt you carried. How did you begin to process something no one could ever prepare for?
Well, when I left the Dakota after our interview, I was accosted, followed, and bugged by the creep who ended up assassinating John hours later. And I felt horribly guilty ever since for not reporting him right away to the Dakota security team, which I should have. They may have noticed that he had the gun in his pocket of the coat he was wearing and gotten rid of him, and that jerk obnoxiously kept shouting out to me as he followed me. "Did you talk to him? Did you get his autograph? What'd he say? What'd he say? What'd he say?" Ugh, it made me sick, and I wanted to smack him and kick him, but I finally went fast enough up the street for him to finally stop following me.
Hmm.
And then a few hours later, when I heard John had died after being shot and they showed the jerk on TV who admitted killing him, I was horrified to see it was the same assassin who followed me. Ugh, and that's when I started feeling incredibly guilty for years and years and years.
How did that night and the years that followed change the tragedy of your life?
Well, the guilt I felt after finding out John had been killed by the creep who followed me that I'd neglected to report kept me feeling ashamed and regretful and sad for decades. And it made it somewhat hard for me to continue rock star interviews the same way I'd used to. But I managed to anyway and made a point of telling everyone I spoke with
Hmm.
about my incredible time spent with John and Yoko mere hours before John got shot and killed outside the Dakota.
What helped you finally release the blame you placed yourself? on yourself?
Ay, well, to be honest, I still haven't fully released the blame I've carried for decades, over 45 years now. I just feel slightly less guilty now that I've written about it at length in my book and had so many people tell me that John's death is not considered to be completely my fault. Thank goodness. Certainly helps me hear that whenever they tell me that.
Yeah, it's not your fault. But your book isn't just about John Lennon's last interview. It's about your entire journey, which your book actually talks about. What did writing it heal, reveal, or reclaim you?
Well, it's made me feel super talented and accomplished when it comes to appreciating rock and roll as well as bands and musicians. Plus, it's helped my memory, which can be kind of difficult to keep in touch when I get older, as of course I am constantly.
Yeah, we are all older. What do you hope readers understand about you after reading Confessions of Rock and Roll Name Dropper?
Well, I want them to know how much I've always loved rock radio and the music I've heard on it ever since I was a toddler, and how important it's been to me since I've been a tiny kid throughout my entire life, even up through today. Plus, they need to know about all the rock stars I've been super lucky to meet up with and speak to personally and see perform live. So important when it comes to defining and understanding everything about my life, which is totally related to rock and roll.
Yeah, your life is related to rock and roll. What's one story in the book that still makes you laugh and one that still makes you pause?
Well, I definitely still laugh when I think about what happened with my loving boyfriend during my first college year, which was at UCSC in Santa Cruz. I surprised him by coming back to the room that we lived in early one evening from my campus gig, and I found him taking photos of himself wearing my fancy dress and plenty of female makeup and girl shoes. Ha! And that's why I titled the chapter in my book that I wrote about him after the famous Aerosmith song Dude Looks Like a Lady, because he absolutely did and probably still does. And plus, the story in my book that makes me pause is when I was accosted at a punk rock concert in San Francisco starring Iggy Pop that was terrific. But I was accosted by this creepy old guy who kept coming up to me and bugging and bothering me. And I didn't know who he was, but my date that I was with told me that I should know. He turned out to be someone from my least favorite rock band, none other than band leader Jerry Garcia of the Grateful Dead, who I was definitely not a fan of. Ugh. So finally he left me and walked away.
But you interviewed nearly every major name in rock. Who challenged you the most and who surprised you with their humanity?
Well, actually, they were all superhuman, and I adored talking to and writing about each and every one of them, not just the former Fab Four members, but everyone else from the Ramones to David Bowie, who I always adored, and Mick Jagger, who was super complimentary after hearing me do my on-air radio newscast. Yay! And the talking heads were great to be with and talk to, too. And so was Little Richard and so many others that I met up and spoke with.
Read the story behind the Mick Jagger on hold so he can listen to your new cast. That's iconic.
Well, when Mick called me to be interviewed for the huge RKO radio show I was writing and co-producing, the top 100 of the 70s, I asked him if he wanted to call me back after my newscast, but he instead insisted on staying on the phone with me to listen. It made me so nervous, but afterwards he told me how great my voice sounded and how well written my stories were, and it made me feel even more excited about talking with him about his rock and roll history and top songs of the past decade, plus the incredible Rolling Stones Nicaragua benefit concert I'd won tickets to while I was in high school. What a great show to see.
Yeah, that ticket. That was the golden ticket. What did those years teach you about ego, artistry, and the cost of fame?
Well, I have to admit that I felt super creative and self important about meeting up with and talking to rock stars for years and years and years. For everything from radio shows to print magazine and newspaper articles to music videos. And I've totally loved seeing as many live concerts as possible my entire life, including now. These days, I still go to concerts all the time, every time I can, especially if they happen to be musicians I've met and interviewed years before.
So, how has telling your story fully, honestly changed the way you see your younger self?
Well, it makes me feel even better about how I handled growing up with my dysfunctional mother and creepy stepfather, and more responsible for putting my incredibly successful career together. Yay, even with them trying to, tell me, no, don't do it. You can't. But I did anyway, and it all turned out terrific.
Yeah. What do you want listeners to know about Lori, who lived through the days versus the Lori who wrote this book?
Well, I actually want them to understand that even though I don't work on the radio or do rock radios anymore, I'm still talented and can tell super great stories, especially about my experiences. And all they have to do is read my book, totally enjoy it, take a look at the incredible book cover, which is a black and white version of the picture that was taken of me with John and Yoko, and they'll really enjoy it, hopefully. You enjoyed it, didn't you?
I enjoyed the book from start to finish. I got to go back. My husband was listening to it as well, and he says, "Who is this lady?" And I said, "Well, she worked at KFRC here in San Francisco." So your book is simply amazing.
Well,
Yes,
thank you.
amazing. It goes in very detail from your childhood to winning that ticket, to starting your career from San Francisco to going to the Midwest to Bali, the whole, I mean, just amazing, amazing. For someone who never heard your story, why is now the moment that you should read your book? Why should they read your book now?
Well, every year, of course, December 8th is the anniversary of John Lennon being shot
Mhm.
and killed. And I concentrate on that and talk about the part it played in my life, and people can totally relate it to it. And what's really encouraging is that during our interview, John was the first one to actually encourage me to write a book. And I eventually did. It was so cool. And if he were still alive, hopefully now he'd say, wow, and read it and totally dig it. And of course, enjoy seeing the photo taken of me with him and Yoko, plus the autographs they both gave me on my copy of Grapefruit, which was Yoko's book, which I brought with me to the Dakota to show them and tell them how much I loved it. And I've given a copy of my book recently to their son, Sean Lennon, but I don't know if he's read it yet or shared it with his mother, Yoko. And here's hoping so, if he hasn't already, that he will really soon.
Yeah, yeah. I believe he will, and I believe he will really enjoy your book. So, with that said, with John and if he was alive today, what do you think he would say about your memoir? What would you think he would say?
Well, he'd totally relate to it. How could he not? It's my life wrapped around his. And of course, if he were still alive today, had lived after being shot, then he would relate to that and be thankful that he had lived. And so sad to say that the creep whose name I never say and never print in my book, who actually did kill him, hadn't. If
Mhm.
only he was still alive, it would be great, and I would hopefully still be friends with John and Yoko, because the cool thing was during our interview, we all made plans to get together in 2 weeks again in San Francisco at what was Yoko's favorite Japanese restaurant. We were all gonna eat dinner together and talk about things that we hadn't talked about during the interview, relationships, how I should have a better relationship, and and things that we had in common and everything. And I was so looking forward to it. And it just made me cry so hard when we couldn't do it because John was shot and killed.
Yeah. And reading your book, it's how you found out and you ran right over to the hospital. So yeah. So what do you hope stays with people long after the close of the final page?
Well, I of course want everyone to find out and remember how important it is to realize that a dysfunctional family upbringing doesn't have to wreck your entire life. That worked for me and it worked for John too. It's something we had in common. And I instead, like it did with me, encourage everybody reading my book to work a whole lot harder to be successful when it comes to their education, love, and hopefully super terrific career. Yeah. I mean, it obviously worked out for John, even though he wasn't raised by his father and barely raised by his mother. So I totally relate to him.
So is there any other details that um the audience should know about your book?
Well, yeah, there are a couple really cool things that they should know is in there. For one thing, if they say to themselves, I've always wanted a John Lennon autograph, they should know that I included the autograph that John and Yoko gave me in their book, Yoko's book, Grapefruit, that John did the introduction for. I put it in my book so everybody now can have their own John Lennon autograph as soon as they get my book. And that's really cool. And I think they'll totally dig it. And also seeing all the pictures of me with not just John Lennon that I took, this picture, me and John and Yoko, the original color one, but the incredible picture that I got to take with Paul and Linda McCartney, which
Mhm.
was also a great interview. So there's so many things for people to really enjoy when they get the book. If they listen to the audiobook version like you did, they get to hear my voice talk and they get to hear pieces of original interview quotes, which is great. Or
Yes.
if they read the book, they'll be able to read interview quotes and get my writing technique and hopefully be inspired by all of it.
Well, I was inspired. I got to go back and go through it again, chapter by chapter. It's a great book. You did a really, really good job, and you cannot blame yourself, at the end. But you did a really, you did a really good job with this book. You talk more about your lifestyle, you talk more about your journey all the way up from how your family setting was to getting that I'm gonna call it the golden ticket and going I think that golden ticket just was your opening to the path of everything in your life and how it ended up today, working at KFRC in the Bay, going to school, Santa Cruz, UC Santa Cruz. I believe they're named the Slugs now, right? The Slugs was their thing. And then I think you went to UC Berkeley as well after.
I did. That's where I actually started going to journalism school. But I was only in journalism school for a few months. And the professor said to me, why are you in school? You already know how to write really great. You should go get an internship. You'll get a job right away and you can quit school and make money right away. So that's exactly what I did. I was immediately hired as the very first newsroom intern by KFRC in San Francisco, the top radio station of the nation at that time. And not only was it great right from the beginning, I immediately started writing radio specials right away, but I got a job offer as the news editor right away and immediately was told, oh, yes, we also would like you to write the RKO Beatles special, which is going to be the longest one ever created in the United States. So I wrote it and co-produced it. And then it was 14 hours long originally, RKO Presents the Beatles, but it was so popular when it aired that it immediately got taken to air in the UK and everywhere else in the world. And we got to expand it to 17 hours and change the name to the one I'd originally come up with, The Beatles from Liverpool's Legend. And it was even more popular. And when I interviewed Beatles producer George Martin, he told me that it was the best Beatles special he'd ever heard in his entire life, and he listened to it twice on the air in the UK, and that made me feel great too. So I know I can write still.
Yeah. What concert did you go to when you were at the Oakland Coliseum?
At which Coliseum?
The Oakland Coliseum.
Plenty of them. I saw a number of artists there. It's hard to remember because I saw so many
So many,
concerts
so
back
many.
in those days. Yeah.
All right. As we wind down, what would you like your legacy to be?
Well, I want people to let me know constantly how much they enjoy my book, leave great reviews. Hopefully online they can post them 5-star complimentary glowing reviews on Amazon or Goodreads or bookstore website, and that will make me feel terrific and show other people that, yeah, I should read this, I should get this. And I'd love for them to go to my book website, which is confessionsofarockandrollnamedropper.com, and they can find out so much more about me and my book and all the TV, radio shows, and podcasts I've been on, and reviews I've gotten and everything, and see more pictures and find out about awards I've won for the book. And it's just, there's just so much more that they can find out about me. I love talking to people about it.
Yeah. And I'm telling you guys, go get her book, go get the Audible. It is a great read. It is a great listen. For me, I love the Audible. I love hearing from start to finish her her lifestyle, her career, to where she's up to now. So please go get her book and leave the reviews. This is Cali Cat Tap Talks, and we're going to tap right on out.